Hey guys, Shiko here, and today, let's go over a guide for the last dragon in the Dragon Shackles raid, Tonatiuh, the Light Dragon. The raid requirements are 10 to 20 people, where parties of 12 or below will result in the boss having half health compared to parties of 13 or more. Just like the other dragon raids, you will be able to obtain rewards once per week for each difficulty per dragon. The objective is to defeat Tonatiuh within 6 minutes before he hits Enrage. Before we begin, let's discuss the key components of this raid. First, you'll notice two floating platforms to the west and east. These will contain crystals for a later mechanic and will be shown later. Next, you'll want to assign 2 players, preferably ranged, to handle crystal duty. Assignment is not necessary, but it will help with consistency as these players will be looking out for cast bars and possibly losing uptime to ensure mechanics execute properly. Of course, every player should know how to do these crystal mechanics in case they die, but I'll explain these mechanics shortly. For healers, this boss does a lot of untelegraphed circle cleaves around him, usually after each cast bar mechanic, so be sure to mitigate and heal as necessary. And lastly, the party lead will want to make sure that the party list is evenly divided, as we'll be doing 2 separate parties later on in the fight. Alright, now we're ready to begin. As with any boss, tank should face the boss away from the party. There will be a few wing slam attacks, a large conal breath attack, and a tank buster called Spacetime Collapse. This tank buster targets the tank with the highest aggro, dealing massive damage, drastically lowering the tank's aggro, and inflicts a vulnerability status that makes the tank take more damage. This tank should avoid taking back aggro until the vulnerability wears off. Do note that this tank buster can occur during any part of this fight and may very well kill you due to bad timing. Players should be aware of this and avoid the tanks. The first mechanic the boss will cast is called Void Duel Pact, where 2 random players will be marked with an AOE. The marked player closest to the boss needs to drop it in the center of the arena, while the farthest player marked will drop it on the edge of the arena. When the AOEs go off, 2 Spacetime crystals will spawn wherever the AOEs were dropped. These crystals will be used for the upcoming mechanic called Spacetime Blitz. This mechanic is a 2-part mechanic that will always prelude Purifying Light. When the cast bar for Spacetime Blitz finishes, the boss will fly up and quickly slam the ground, dealing lethal damage, wiping the party. For this mechanic, this is where players on crystal duty comes in. They will head over to their respective crystals and watch for the Spacetime Blitz cast bar to finish and wait for the visual cue of the boss flying up. The moment the boss flies up, all party members should head to a crystal, and the players on crystal duty will interact with the crystals so that the crystals become Spacetime fields. These fields grant immunity to projectiles and significantly reduces damage taken to survive the blitz. On Hard+Nightmare mode, 2 players who interacted with the crystals will have large AOEs they'll need to bring to the edge of the arena. They should do this immediately after the boss slams down. These AOEs should ideally be placed away from where the crystals are being dropped. After 5 seconds, the AOEs will drop permanent puddles that stay for the duration of the entire fight. Standing on these puddles deals massive dot damage, so they should be dropped away from the party. Puddles can be dropped on top of existing puddles if you time it right, but just be careful. Once Spacetime Blitz is complete, the boss will begin casting Purifying Light. This is a one-shot mechanic where the boss will summon a light wall in the shape of a ring, and any players who come into contact with it will immediately perish. This mechanic has 2 variations that are indicated by the cast bar name, Scatter or Gather. For Scatter, once the cast bar hits 0, the light wall ring will originate from the middle of the arena and expand outwards. And for Gather, it will originate from the edge of the arena and contract inwards. In order to resolve this mechanic, the spacetime fields will transform into rifts that will be used to travel between one another. Interacting with any of these portals will teleport the player to the other one on the field. For the scatter variation, players will need to group up on the outer portal, and once the light wall finishes expanding past the middle portal, interact with the outer portal to teleport into the middle. For the gather variation, players will need to group up on the inner portal, and once the light wall has finished contracting past the outer portal, interact with the inner portal to teleport outwards. On Nightmare difficulty, going through any rifts will result in the player receiving a small AOE, so make sure to spread. That concludes Purifying Light. Throughout this fight, you'll see another mechanic where 3 random players are marked with red circular AOEs. Despite the appearance, these are essentially party stacks. Because they don't give players any type of vulnerability, they can all be stacked on top of each other for everyone to soak the damage. At some point during the fight, you'll also see adds. Pretty straightforward, group them up and kill them so that it's not a wipe. When enough damage is dealt, the boss will begin casting End of Space Time. When the cast bar hits 0, the entire arena will glow orange with 3 large arrows emanating from the middle of the arena. Once the boss is completely charged, he will slam the arena, knocking all players up and outwards. Standing in the middle will result in instant death, as this is also proximity damage. Players will need to position themselves into 2 groups at the edge of the arena, on the same side of the platforms with the floating crystals. Once the slam happens, each team will end up on their respective crystals platform. As a word of caution, sometimes a knockback won't knock you up unless you're walking towards the platform. In order to determine who goes on which platform, we'll use the same party list we assigned earlier. Those who are on the left side of the list within parties 1 and 3 will go west to the light crystal side, while those on the right side of the list within parties 2 and 4 will go east on the dark crystal side. This begins phase 2, where the goal of this phase is to destroy both of the crystals at the same time, before they charge up the boss, resulting in an instant wipe. The crystals will periodically deal raid-wide damage, but once destroyed, players will need to carefully jump down in order to resume the fight. On Hard+Nightmare mode, both crystals will periodically gain shields. Upon depleting these shields, players on that platform will receive a vulnerability debuff for the same element as that crystal. This means that players who destroy the light crystal shield will receive extra damage from the light crystal's raid wide, while the same thing applies to the dark crystal. In order to not die from these raid wides, a portal will appear upon the shield being broken. Players must take these teleport to the other crystal and resume destroying them, switching whenever they break a shield. As a reminder, all players who passes through a rift will have a small AOE under them, so spread accordingly. And for the last phase, phase 3, you're primarily going to see repeats of the same mechanics from phase 1 with a few exceptions. The last new mechanic you'll see is called Radiant Seed. Upon the cast bar finish, 6 yellow crystals will spawn with 5 on the edge and 1 in the middle, each having their own giant AOEs covering nearly the entire arena. Players are able to interact with these crystals to pick them up and move them, although picking one up will slow the player's movements. For the sake of consistency, whoever was on crystal duty should also handle this mechanic. I recommend moving the crystal that's in the same spot as where the outer portal has been being placed, as ideally it should be the side without any puddles. Once the crystal is moved, all players should move to the safe spot made by the crystal bearer. However, if you have good gear and mitigation, you can stand in at most one of these AOEs and ignore the mechanic. You cannot, however, take 2 of these as you will die. And lastly, one mechanic you'll see vary in Nightmare mode is Purifying Light. After resolving Spacetime Blitz the same way as you normally do, the boss will begin casting Purifying Light with both variations, Scatter and Gather, back to back. The execution will be the same, but I'll go ahead and show the movement anyway for both combinations. This is when Scatter is first, followed by Gather. And here is Gather first and then Scatter. And that concludes all of our mechanics. Hope you enjoyed, and as always, thanks for watching.